seized in last month's raid on Mar-a-Lago. The 11th Circuit ruling this evening that the Justice Department can regain access to about 100 classified documents that Florida District Judge Eileen Cannon had barred them from using as part of a criminal probe. A three-judge panel stating, quote, "We decide only the narrow question presented, whether the United States has established that it is entitled to a stay of the district court's order to the extent that it, one, requires the government to submit for their special master's review the documents with classification markings, and two, enjoins the United States from using that subset of documents in a criminal investigation. We conclude that it has." Interesting to note that two of the three judges on the 11th Circuit panel that signed off on the order are Trump appointees. The third was picked by former President Barack Obama. Let's get some expert insight tonight into the latest legal jeopardy facing the former president from former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General John Yoo. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Mike. Great to be with you.
Sort of the breaking news tonight, a federal appeals court lifting a judge's hold on the Justice Department's ability to use classified records taken from former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Joe, how big of a development is that?
Yeah, it's significant, Mike. It's not a great break for former President Donald Trump, but it's not a great surprise either. The 11th Circuit basically said, look, we're not that impressed with the former president's argument that he declassified these records. And in any event, we don't really care so much because it's not disputed. This is government property. And so, therefore, we're giving it back to the government for them to be able to use as part of their investigation. So it's a small misstep, I'd say. But I think on the declassification point, that's something that could be a problem because former President Trump's case largely hinges on his argument that he declassified these records. And the judges at the 11th Circuit, they weren't too impressed.
Okay, John, how do you assess tonight's development?
Mike, I think that there's one more setback here for the Trump team, and this has not been a good legal day for them by any means. The main problem is that the appeals court, the 11th Circuit here, said that the Justice Department is allowed to continue a criminal investigation into President Trump's handling of the documents. That's a really important thing because what the district judge here tried to do is say, you can look at the documents just to see whether national security has been harmed, but I'm ordering you to stop any criminal investigation using these classified documents. And the 11th Circuit said the district judge went too far by interfering in internal DOJ operations. This is significant because it recognizes that President Trump might be on the hook criminally here because of the mishandling of the classified documents. It allows justice to use all investigatory tools at its disposal to keep that investigation going.
Okay, to the legal issues in New York, former President Trump offering his reaction to Sean Hannity tonight.
I actually thought that they would never bring a case, and she brought it. And the reason I thought, because she didn't have a case, I was of the impression she wanted to settle. But I had a problem because how do you pay something, even if it's a small amount of money, if you're not guilty? This was just a continuation of a witch hunt that began when I came down the escalator at Trump Tower.
It was a 220-page civil lawsuit. How damaging is it, Joe?
Mike, there's a lot going on with former President Donald Trump right now, and he has some exposure in some of these different cases that are out there. This is not one of them. This case, I mean, I've heard analysts say during the day, this case is a stretch. I'd go further. I'd say it's borderline absurd. And if I were still a New Yorker, I would be furious as a taxpayer that the Attorney General's office spent 3 years investigating Donald Trump based on a campaign promise by the Attorney General back when she ran in 2018, which itself is a terrible precedent to set. And this is the best they came up with. It's not impressive at all.
Here is Letitia James sounding pretty anti-Trump.
I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing him, defending your rights, and then going home.
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you.
Will you sue him for us?
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the He's going to know my name personally.
Sounds pretty personal. John, how do you see this civil lawsuit?
I think unlike the last suit we talked about where Trump's vulnerability seems to be increasing. Here, I think this may be the most vulnerable he'll ever be on this lawsuit, was just on the day the announcement goes. And then as time proceeds, it's going to be less and less serious. I agree with Joe on that point. Because one other thing that can be attacked here is the Attorney General's neutrality and impartiality. She campaigned on prosecuting one person. That's a dangerous precedent to set. Another thing that really worries me is to ask, if President Trump had never been president, would New York and its Attorney General have ever investigated him for any of this before? That makes it seem like he's being punished and singled out because he was a president who happened to be unpopular in New York. Do we want to set that precedent for future presidents?
To COVID mandates, a federal judge in Louisiana striking down a mandate from the Biden administration that required staffers at Head Start child care facilities to be vaccinated and to wear masks. Joe, what about that one?
Mike, we're seeing a pattern here, right? This administration seems perfectly happy to take the authority Congress has granted it and stretching it to the breaking point. We saw it last summer with the eviction moratorium that was struck down by the Supreme Court. We saw the travel mask mandate struck down earlier this year. Now we see this with the Head Start case, and I fully expect the student loan forgiveness will probably be vulnerable in court, too. This administration has to realize it cannot take these emergency powers, play games with whether or not there's even a pandemic at the moment, and then expect that no one's ever going to challenge it. So I'm glad to see the judiciary pushing back and saying, hey, there's a limit to how far you can go.
We're almost out of time. John, let me give you a chance to comment on this one.
I would just say it's not clear which administration is in charge. President Biden's just on TV earlier this week saying the pandemic's over. But in court, his lawyers are still arguing the emergency continues, and the courts are listening to President Biden and not his lawyers.
Joe, John, thanks very much for your analysis tonight.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great night.
As for the current administration, Operation Cleanup continued in and around President Biden's United Nations